The Sports Time Podcast.
Hey guys, it's JJ Peters here. Thanks so much for listening. We really appreciate it. It really helps that you guys are taking the time to listen to this podcast, wherever you're listening. If you're listening to just the audio or YouTube, we can't thank you enough. All right, first of all, big thanks to Mike Clemens and Dan Liebert from the Drive and Kick podcast for returning and coming back on the pod to discuss the NBA playoffs. It was great. Again, beware, the recording wasn't the best. That was on my end. So again, if you're expecting, or if you're seeing some, or if you're hearing some bad audio, that was on my end. So unfortunately, I couldn't make it better. I tried my hardest, but just be aware of that. Again, that was a great conversation. I enjoyed it. Again, thanks for them for coming on. You can check out their podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. Also, you can follow them on Instagram and Twitter at Drive and Kick Podcast. And also the recording was done on Monday as well. So some of the series were over when we were talking about them. So again, beware of that as well. So we released the video format of that on YouTube on Wednesday. So again, don't forget to check that out if you just want to listen to that instead of the whole episode, which I hope you want to listen to the whole episode, but again, it's up to you. So, and then also we have the One for One podcast returning again. Big thanks to my Nolan Schumann and Miles Fuke for coming on. Again, that was great. I learned a lot about hockey. Again, it was great because they talked about what's been happening so far in the NHL playoffs. I highly recommend you guys listen to their podcast, especially if you love hockey. You can follow them on, or you can check them out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, pretty much wherever. You can also follow them on Instagram at @1_1forpod. So again, that was great. Go give them a following, and also don't forget to listen to them. And then, of course, as always, we have the Sports Lightning Round, poll question, questions from Instagram, highlight of the week, and much more. Also, if you're interested in merch from the STP pod, we're really interested in starting to sell some. Again, don't forget to check that out. If you're interested, DM me or email me at sportstownpodcast or at sportstownpodcast@gmail.com, or just write in the YouTube comment section you want STP merch. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the STP newsletter, the STP newsletter is pretty simple. If you haven't listened to the show or missed some parts, you can go and subscribe to the STP newsletter. It's released every Tuesday around 4 or 5 o'clock Central Time. Go check that out. Again, even if you listen to podcasts and you may forgot about a few topics that we talked about, you can go check that out. Again, there's all links to the videos and the audio and all that good stuff. So again, don't forget to check that. All right, under further ado, let's get started. And now on to the highlight of the week.
Missed it. That leaves the door open. Here he comes again. Lillard steps back, fires, bangs it in again.
Oh my goodness. I cannot believe what I'm witnessing here, partner.
What a game from Damian Lillard, and what a shot. I mean, this guy, Damian Lillard, was tremendous. That's why, in my opinion, he's the best point guard in the league. However, despite him dropping 55 points and having one of the best games in the postseason this year, and maybe you have to probably be somewhere in the top 5, they couldn't come up with the win, and the Nuggets take Game 5, 147-140. Brian Anderson from TNT was on the call along with his co-host and former NBA player himself, Greg Anthony. All right, and now it's time for our weekly poll question. You can vote every week on Instagram and Facebook at @sportstown_podcast or on Twitter at SportsTownPod. This week's question, well, we actually have two, but the first question was, are the Nets the best team in the league right now? 60% of you said no, which is very interesting because I thought it'd be the opposite. The Nets, when Kyrie Irving and James Harden and Kevin Durant are on, they're just so hard to beat. And I feel like they're just going to walk. Well, not walk necessarily, because I think the Nets are going to, or the Bucks are going to be a tough series, but it's going to be tough for anybody to beat Brooklyn because, again, Kevin Durant, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, they're all really good. And they're one of the best big threes we've seen since the Golden State Warriors a few years ago. But again, thanks for voting. And then also the other question is, who would you rather build your team around, Jason Tatum or Zion Williamson? Overwhelmingly, you guys chose Jason Tatum, which I agree with, because Jason Tatum's a lot more healthier, and Zion Williamson might have a bigger upside, but the problem is he gets injured a lot and he can't really stay healthy, so that would be my concern. But again, thanks for voting. You can vote every week on Instagram and Facebook at sports_podcast or on Twitter at SportsTownPod. And now on to the Sports Lightning Round, your biggest sports stories of the world from this week. Jake Paul will be stepping back in the ring once again at on August 28th. This time, the YouTuber will take on former UFC welterweight champion Tyron Woodley. Paul just got done knocking out former UFC welterweight fighter Ben Askren and Tyron Woodley's training partner. In fact, Woodley was in Askren's corner when Jake Paul took on the former Olympic champion. To no surprise, both fighters have engaged in trash talking over social media. The vlogger turned boxer is 3-0 with all coming by knockout. On the other hand, Woodley was a former UFC welterweight champion but hasn't won in close to 3 years. The former UFC champion has lost to 4 straight and has not won since 2018 when he defeated Darren Till. Since then, he has lost to Kamaru Usman, Gilbert Burns, Kobe Covington, and Vincent Luque. His UFC record is 19-7-1. T. Wood is no longer with the UFC and is currently a free agent. The fight is scheduled for August 28th on Showtime and will be pay-per-view. Currently, there is no scheduled place for the venue. There is no venue for the scheduled event. The Edmonton football team have officially changed their name from the Eskimos to the Elks. The 14-time Grey Cup champions considered other mascots that included the Evergreens, the Evergolds, the Eclipse, the Elkhounds, the Eagles, and the Elements. The Elks have been called the Eskimos since the late 1800s and have won 14 Grey Cups, second only to the Toronto Argonauts, who have 17. Edmonton decided to change the name last July and went as the Edmonton Football Club until now. However, they still kept the double E as their logo and branding. The club wanted to keep the double E as their primary logo because it had been a part of their branding for so long. Despite not having our name last season, the Elks did not play a regular season game because of the coronavirus pandemic shut down the CFL season. However, this year the CFL will play 14 games for 2021. According to multiple sources, many organizations wanted the team to change their name way back to 2015. The organization were calling for a change, then said that the name is outdated and needs to be changed immediately. The Elks decided to keep their name until July of 2020. The legendary Coach K is planning on retiring after this next season. Krzyzewski coached Duke for over 40 years and will lead them to 5 national championships. He won in 1992, 1991, 2001, 2010, and 2015. He also led the Blue Devils to 12 Final Fours, 15 conference championships, and 12 regular season conference championships. He has over 1,000 wins and is second only behind the late, great John Wooden. Stadium's Jeff Goodman was the first to report the news. A source also confirmed to ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski. Coach K is considered one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time and led USA basketball to 3 gold medals as head coach. He has coached the likes of Jason Tatum, Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, and others. To top it all off, Coach K has the most tournament wins of any basketball coach. Reported by many, former Duke player John Shire will replace Krzyzewski after the 21/2022 season. Crazy to think within a year, Roy Williams and Mike Krzyzewski, 2 future Hall of Famers, will no longer be coaching on the bench. Breaking news in the horse racing world. Bob Baffert, who has 7 Kentucky Derby wins as a trainer, has been suspended by Churchill Downs for 2 years. The suspension will last until the end of 2023 at the spring meet at the racetrack. Medina Spirit won the 147th Run for the Roses, but has now tested positive twice for steroid use. There is a good chance that Mandalone, who finished second only to Medina Spirit, could end up winning the 2021 Kentucky Derby. However, Churchill Downs cannot make the decision, and it's up to the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission. They will determine whether or not Medina Spirit is the winner, although the bettors who bet on Medina Spirit will keep their money if Medina Spirit is disqualified. This is not the first time the future Hall of Fame trainer has accused of something like this. Baffert believes that someone did this on purpose and he had no intentions of drugging his horse. The Hall of Famer trainer will not be allowed to race any of his horses at the Belmont Stakes. That includes the winner of the 147th Run for the Roses. The 2021 Belmont Stakes will take place this Saturday on June 5th at 6:45 p.m. Eastern. This will be the 154th edition of the Belmont Stakes. Rombauer, Essential Quality, and Hot Rod Charlie are the big favorites to win this year's Belmont Stakes. Four-time major champion and second-ranked female tennis player Naomi Osaka has decided to withdraw from the French Open. Osaka decided to withdraw because of her mental health and needed some time away from the court. Before this week, she said that she would skip her mandatory media obligations. She stated that she was dealing with depression and anxiety. Because Osaka skipped her mandatory media obligations, she was fined $15,000. She could also serve a suspension from any of the 4 major tournaments if she continues to skip her media obligations. A day later, she withdrew from the French Open. After withdrawing, the four-time major champion stated, "I'm not a natural public speaker." She continued, "I really get nervous and find it stressful to always try to engage and give the media the best answers I can." Many athletes such as Steph Curry and Serena Williams tweeted out their condolences, and they were proud of the 23-year-old. The Utah Jazz owner Ryan Smith offered Ja Morant's family courtside seats for Games 5 on Wednesday night after 3 Jazz fans yelled sexist and racist insults at his family in Game 2. Everyone close to Ja went to the game except for his mother. She declined and stated that she had anxiety problems after the game. Ja's father, T, stated, "It was unfortunate. It was just a few fans. Most of them were great and cheering right alongside with us." Instead, the 2019/2020 Rookie of the Year's mother watched the game back home in Memphis. Jazz star Donovan Mitchell and minority owner and future Hall of Famer Dwayne Wade also apologized to the family of Ja Morant for the rude behavior of the 3 Utah fans. The Buffalo Sabres have won the number 1 overall pick. The Sabres had the worst record last year, and for the first time since 2018, the worst team in the NHL will receive the number 1 overall pick. The Sabres were also the last team to have the worst record and received the number 1 overall pick back in 2018. The Seattle Kraken, the newest NHL franchise, will receive the number 2 pick. Then it's the Anaheim Ducks, and followed by the New Jersey Devils, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Detroit Red Wings, the San Jose Sharks, the Vancouver Canucks, and the Ottawa Senators. For the second straight year, the NHL draft will be held virtually and will take place on July 23rd and the 24th. The first round will be on the 23rd, and the rounds 2 through 7 will be on the 24th. Philadelphia Eagles tight end Zach Ertz could be on the move very soon. Ertz is getting up there, and if the Eagles move on from the veteran tight end, they will save $8.5 million post-June 1st. The favorite right now to land the former Pro Bowler is the Buffalo Bills. Despite Buffalo already having all-pro receivers in Stephon Diggs, they can use an upgrade in the tight end position and gives them a better shot at topping the Chiefs in the AFC. There has also been rumored that Ertz could be reunited with his former quarterback Carson Wentz in Indy. Early in the offseason, Carson Wentz was traded to the Colts, and it would make a lot of sense to give the former MVP candidate another weapon to throw to. There are also rumors of the Seahawks and Cardinals acquiring the former Stanford product. There has been rumblings of the Eagles acquiring Julio Jones, which would probably send Ertz to Atlanta. In 11 games this season, Ertz caught 36 passes for 335 yards. Despite the struggles in the 2020 season, there is a pretty big market for the former 3-time Pro Bowler. Breaking news in the NBA. Longtime president of basketball operations and former player Danny Ainge is stepping down from his position. Brad Stevens will replace him, and Boston will immediately begin their search for a new head basketball coach. Danny Ainge took over the Celtics as a president of basketball operations in 2003 and helped Boston win the championship in 2008. He was most famous for making the moves to acquire 2 future Hall of Famers in the summer of 2007. Those names were Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen. The Celtics would end up winning a championship in 2008, their first in 22 years. On the other side, Brad Stevens was reportedly worn down after the bubble and a disappointing season this year. ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski was the first to report that Stevens was worn down. On Wednesday, Brad Stevens stated about his new job, "I'm grateful to the ownership and to Danny for trusting me with this opportunity. I love the Celtics, and I know the great honor and responsibility that comes with this job. I will give it everything, and I have to help us be in position to consistently compete for championships." And now, on to our interviews with the Drive and Kick podcast and 1-for-1 podcast.
Here we go.
All right, I'm pleased to be joined by the 2 hosts of the Drive and Kick podcast, Mike Clemens and Dan Liebert. How's it going, guys?
It's good, man. Can't complain. Just been enjoying these NBA playoffs and working, man.
Likewise, bro. I'm doing well. Just hanging in there, ready for summer to start.
Yep. Again, thanks for coming on, guys. It's been a pretty fun NBA playoffs. I'm a little surprised with how quickly the Bucks took down the Heat. What did you guys think about that series?
Yeah, Roy, it was definitely a little surprising just considering the run the Heat had in last year in the bubble. But I think when you watch the game, it's clear that this Bucks team is a way better team than we've ever seen Giannis have. Giannis is the best that he's ever been. And on the flip side, the Heat don't have the playmaking on their side that they had last year. I think Tyler Hero really came on the scene last year, and that really helped, but he's had a bit of a sophomore slump. I think them losing Victor Oladipo, I think the way that they play down the stretch through Jimmy Butler, who kind of refuses to shoot the ball for the first 3 quarters of the game, really hurts them. So I think watching the game, it makes sense, but just watching it from afar, it would be easy to be surprised.
Yeah, I would have to echo that. I just think it was a bad matchup for the Heat. The Bucks are definitely an improved team, but when I look at all the injuries Miami suffered throughout the season, and then I look at the quick turnaround from last year, and then, you know, they're playing Tyler Hero at the point guard position earlier in the year. Jimmy gets hurt. You know, just a lot of things that were going on. There was not a lot of stability, and like Dan said, they didn't have a lot of playmaking and not a lot of shooting, to be honest with you, even though they're a 3-point shooting team. So I'm a Miami fan, and I called it in 6. I didn't think they would get swept, but I'm not surprised.
Do you think that, I know it was early, this is back early in the season, the Heat were thinking about trading for James Harden. Do you think they should have made that move earlier in the year?
I think that they definitely look silly now for not doing it, but I understand them not wanting to give up a long-term piece in Tyler Hero. So it's a little bit of give and take. It just depends what their goals are. Obviously, if they felt like they were a championship team this year, then yeah, they look kind of stupid for not having done it. But it seems like they're playing the long-term game and they're very strategic in what they do. So I hope that this kind of woke them up as to what they're really lacking, which is a very dynamic playmaking guard.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I just think that they're actually doing the rebuild complete from the beginning, and I think Jimmy opting to go there in free agency sped them along, because you look at Bam and Tyler, they're kind of in the same age range, and then the rest of the supporting cast that are younger are all the same age, and I think they didn't really want to take on or give up the young pieces for James to try to win a championship now when there's, you know, Brooklyn is really good and the Clippers are really good. I just feel like they understood that their timeline isn't right now.
Speaking of the Clippers, and it seems like they got everything situated, and it looks like they're going to end up beating the Mavericks, I think. Now, at the time of this recording, it was Monday. So do you think if the Clippers do end up getting bounced out of the playoffs, do you think there's a chance that Kawhi Leonard goes to the Heat? Because I think I was talking with someone last week, and he mentioned, I think it was Chris from Sports Talk with Chris. He talked about how he thinks there's a chance that Kawhi could join the Heat next or this offseason. Do you think there's a chance of that if the Clippers don't make it to the finals this year?
I'm not sure about him going anywhere. I'm not sure that I can really pinpoint a team for him to go to. I think the Heat would make sense, but it's tough for me to see Kawhi leaving. I feel like he's turned into more of a diva than we first expected him to be, or than we first kind of looked at him when he was with the Spurs. But overall, it's tough for me to see him wanting to leave, because he chose to go to LA, to the Clippers over the Lakers, because he wanted to have his own team, and also he wants to be home. And I think that's kind of a big thing for Kawhi. So I'm not sure that I see him leaving, but I definitely see some big changes happening in the Clippers organization.
Yeah, I think if the Clippers lose, I think Miami's a dark horse. I just think he's a California kid that likes living in California. I would say Golden State probably has a better chance than Miami, in my opinion. And I don't know how much the Clippers would, just jump ship on their current roster. But I do think they would have to make some significant changes if they at least didn't make the conference final.
Yeah, let's go to the series with the Mavericks and Clippers. Now, I mentioned recently that this right now the series is tied 2-2. Do you think the Clippers can win the next 2 games and then win another home game? Because it seems like I think both teams have won the road games and no one has won the home game. Do you guys think that the Clippers can just win easily Game 5 and Game 6?
I think that Game 4 told us a lot about how they have responded to being punched in the mouth in games 1 and 2. I think Luka looking like he's hurt is a big factor. But honestly, for me personally, I felt like the whole series would go the way Game 4 did. So if the Clippers can stay this locked in for 2 more games, then I don't see the Mavericks winning another game. But it all depends on how the Clippers come out, because it seems like whether they come out flat, whether they come out lazy, what their game plan is, I think that dictates how the Mavericks do more than the Mavericks having a great game. Obviously, Luka played out of his mind and stuff the first 2 games, but I really think that that's containable with the roster that the Clippers have, the way it's built. They're built to be a very good defensive team and to contain one-man storms like that, especially when he's making easy reads the whole game. So I think if they stay locked in the way they were in Game 4 specifically, they easily should win the next 2 games.
Yeah, I think it's over for the Mavericks. I think the Clippers are going to win 4 straight and move on to the second round. And yeah, Luka's hurt, and I know that's taking a toll on his ability to play make. But the Mavericks just aren't making as many of those threes they were making before. Like the first 3 games or the first 2 games, they're the other guys besides Luka, Kleba, Jalen Brunson, Tim Hardaway, those guys are hitting everything they throw up, right? They're averaging 18, 19 threes a game. And then when you hold them below, that 15 mark, threes for the game, they're not, they're getting blown out. And I just don't think Luka has enough help, honestly. Porzingis is not a second option. So I think they're going to win 4 straight and then move on to the next round.
Well, we saw in Game 3 and 4, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George played out of their mind, and I think I was impressed with that. But I think at the same time, it just also goes to show you that the Mavericks need to give Luka some help. And during the offseason, Mark Cuban needs to go out and just pay someone in free agency, because Luka is pretty much doing what I'm seeing is Luka's pretty much doing everything. And as you mentioned, Porzingis is just not the type of guy. They need to find another guy to help out Luka. But Luka's been pretty impressive despite, what's happened with him and stuff like that, with him trying to do everything. So let's go to another series. Let's start with the Nuggets and Blazers. That series is very interesting. What do you guys think about that? And do you think, or who do you guys have winning that series?
This is a bit of a biased opinion because they are my favorite team, but I have the Blazers winning the next 2 games and winning the series in 6. I think Portland showed a lot in Game 4. Just the fact that they were able to win with, I think the stat was it was their first win in 3 or 4 years, or even more, with Damian Lillard having 10 points or less. The way that the supporting cast stepped up to really, on both sides of the ball too, is what's really impressive. But I think it's going to come down to the production of the guys that aren't Dame and Jokic. And I think Portland has the edge on paper. So if they come as locked in the next 2 games, then it honestly should be no issue. But there has been a lot of inconsistency as far as Melo and Anthony Simons and even Cantor's production. Like in Game 4, they played Rondae Hollis-Jefferson as the backup center, and it was good as far as defensive matchups, but the rebounding production was definitely down. And I'm not sure that we can hold Jokic to such a non-MVP-like game for 3 straight games. So that's maybe the Blazers' kryptonite, but I still think that if everything plays out the way any basketball fan expects it to, I think that the Blazers win the next 2 games and move on to round 2.
I'm conflicted because I like the Blazers team, but I also like the Nuggets, and I don't trust the Blazers. I do think they can win the series. I don't think the Nuggets supporting cast around Jokic is enough to propel them to 2 more wins, but I do think they can get 1 more, especially in Denver. So I think Denver wins the next one, and then Portland wins the next 2, and they win in 7.
Yeah, you were mentioning the supporting cast for Denver, and I think without Jamal Murray, that's a big loss for the Nuggets. And I mean, I think I originally had the Nuggets winning that series, but I wouldn't be surprised if Portland did, because I do believe Damian Lillard is the best point guard in the league, and I think he's one of the most underrated players. And it seems like he's people always kind of want to forget about him, but I feel like when Dame Lillard is on, it's going to be hard for any team to stop him, because again, I think he's the best point guard in the league. Let's go back to the Eastern Conference real quick. I forgot to mention the Brooklyn and Boston. It seems like that series is over. Brooklyn's dominating. What have you guys taken away from there? And do you think there's a shot Boston can win one more game?
Yeah, man. I think Boston's going to need another incredible performance from Jason Tatum. It's really unfortunate for them that they lost Jaylen Brown. I think that is extra firepower that they're obviously very much lacking. But what I'm taking away is that this Milwaukee series is going to be so interesting because Brooklyn refuses to play defense. I'm not sure if it's out of laziness. Like, we know that they're capable defenders, all 8 of them that get minutes, but they just really don't need to. They put up 140. Harden, Kyrie, and KD put up 104 of those 140. It's just going to be as far as this series, I think it's over by next game. I think these guys are finally getting it going, and they're incredibly hard to stop on back-to-back possessions, and that's kind of the biggest thing for Boston. They're outmanned on offense, and they can't get a stop on defense. So I think that series is over, and I just think that what I've learned so far is that the series against Milwaukee is going to be a lot more interesting than we think, because I think Milwaukee matches up against them on both sides of the ball better than anyone in the league.
Yeah, I agree with what Dan said about the matchup portion in the next round. I've been saying it before the playoffs started that I think Milwaukee has a better chance to beat them than Philly does, just because I think Milwaukee has more offense. But what I've learned from this series is, one, that, Jason Tatum is better than I originally thought, and he has carried them in that play-in game and the one game they won in this series. That he is special, and they got to figure out something in Boston this offseason. I think there's going to be major turnaround this offseason in Boston. And on the Brooklyn side of things, one thing, I'm not worried about the defense, because you just need to get stops when they matter. And when you shoot as much as they do, you're going to give up points on the other end, right? You can give up 120 if you score 140. But I'm realizing that there's times throughout the games where they go to strictly ISO ball and there's zero player movement. It's one person dribble, and he gives it a real late shot clock. And I think I don't know if they can beat Milwaukee doing that. I think that they have the capability to, but that's one thing that really, really worries me, because Milwaukee's going to score just as much as them, and they're going to have to make Milwaukee work. And if they try to ISO them, I just don't think that's in their favor. But it remains to be seen.
I think Brooklyn is the most talented team in the league right now, and I still have them right now winning it all. But it seems like on the other side, Boston, it seems like they need to, as you mentioned, they need to give Jason Tatum some help. But it is crazy to know it's just a few years ago they were so close to, or at least going to the finals. And you mentioned there's probably going to be a major turnaround in the offseason. Do you think there's a chance that Brad Stevens, I don't think he's going to lose his job, but do you guys think he'll still be with Boston after this season?
Tough to say. I think with the influx of talent that he's had come in and come out in the last few years, and to not have it have really amounted to anything, talking about guys like Kemba, Gordon Hayward, despite the injuries, they still have Tatum and Brown. I think Danny Ainge keeps making really good moves to put them in a position that should be good, and I just think that they're not putting it together. So I'm not sure if it's blow everything up and build around JT, or if it's a change at the coaching position. I think one of the two is coming, because the thing is, they're gonna have to make a decision whether they can afford to pay Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum as well. So it's going to be a tough decision for them for sure.
I don't think he's on a hot seat yet. I think, especially because there was injuries this season, and they don't have a true big man, and Kemba's been hurt. I think next year they're going to make a bunch of moves this offseason, and then after next season, if it doesn't go as expected, I think then they're going to start to really look at making a coaching change. One thing about their superstars in Boston is they have two very, very elite wings that are two-way players, but they don't make the people around them better. So you have to have very specific pieces around them, right? It's not like you're playing with a it's similar to Kawhi and Paul George, two really good wings offensively and defensively, but they don't make people around them better. They need the Rondo, right? They need other guys that can do that for them. So it'd be very interesting, but I think Danny's getting close to the hot seat. He's not there yet, but he's teetering. He's teetering.
Do you think Boston should do something in free agency this year, like get a major start? Because it seems like they're always in the hunt for someone. I feel like they were in the hunt for Kawhi. They were in the hunt for LeBron. They were in the hunt for Anthony Davis. It feels like every year they're in the hunt for someone. Do you think they should get a major free agent this year? Because I guess, yeah, Kawhi is a free agent if he opts out. But what do you guys think they should do in the offseason?
Tough to say. Just like Mike said, Tatum and Brown, whether they decide to re-sign Brown or not, is probably what will decide if they go after a big free agent. It's tough because, like Mike said, they don't make guys around them better. I think the Evan Fournier trade was a great trade as far as he's a great third or fourth fiddle type guy that doesn't need to be fed the ball to really get his. I think that's the type of guys that they need to build, that they need to bring around either Tatum or Tatum and Brown. It's tough to say because they have their three best players are all ball dominant guys who don't create for others. And I think that, just like Mike said, I'm just reiterating everything he said, that's not going to work as far as with the complementary pieces that they have right now. So I think that's what they need to focus on is the complementary pieces. But it's tough to say because I feel like Danny Ainge is a very business first type of guy, and he's really proved that. So it's very possible that he makes some type of a big splash where it feels like they're going to try and win now, but that's proven unsuccessful the last couple of years with the Kemba, the Kyrie, all that stuff. So I feel like it's very 50-50. It just kind of depends how Danny Ainge is feeling this offseason.
Yeah, I think their two biggest needs are, well, I think Kemba's out of there, and I really love Kemba. He's one of my favorite players, but I think he's gone just because his injury history just hasn't panned out. I think they need a point guard. I think they should go either really, really veteran at the point guard, like a Kyle Lowry, or really, really young to match the timeline up with the two superstar wings, and then get a vet big like an Andre Drummond or whatever, because they just need an inside presence where they're not getting destroyed on the glass. That's the biggest problem. And Robert Williams is serviceable. He's a good shot blocker, but he's not a rebounding big, right? Like they need someone who's big and plays big. So I think they need a point guard, and I think they need a big center and a little bit of depth. I don't know if they keep Marcus Smart, or I'm not sure what they're going to do, but they need some depth too, because I don't really know who comes off the bench and gives them real production on the offensive end.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a wild offseason, especially for Boston. Let's go on to another series in the East before we jump back into the West. The Knicks and Hawks, that's gotten a little interesting. Trae Young has been great. What do you guys have thought about that series, and how impressed are you guys with Trae Young?
I've been one of the guys from the very beginning, been very advocating for Trae Young, saying that he's the best player in the series. A lot of people thought that the Knicks experience with D Rose and Coach Tibbs would be kind of the tipping point in their favor, but I just feel like Trae Young has been so ready for this moment. He's really fun to watch, and it's fun because he hasn't had to even go for 40 or 50 to will them to a win yet. He's been doing it averaging 25 and 10 every game, and it's really fun to watch. They're obviously loaded offensively, and I think a big question mark comes in the offseason for the Hawks as well, as far as do they re-sign Nate McMillan to be their long-term coach, or do they go in a different direction? Because as soon as that change at the head coaching position was made, the direction of this team was where we expected it to be with all these offseason moves. So I think the Hawks take this one in 5 or 6, and I'm excited to see them compete against Philly in the next round.
Yeah, I agree. Dan has been very bullish on Trae Young. And it's not like I haven't, but I think he's exceeded expectations, especially against a Knicks team that was very, they were a good defensive team all year, right? They're kind of rough and tough like the old school Knicks, and Trae has just completely demolished him. But I think Atlanta's front office did a great job in the offseason. They are a modern day team that can shoot the ball. They can space the floor. They have lob catchers. They have a point guard that can shoot and pass. Like, I think they're one of those young teams in the East that are going to be a problem in the years to come. If they get maybe one or two more vets, I think they're a real contender in a year or two. I think this year, I'm eager to see them match up with Philly in the next round because Philly's great defensively and Atlanta is great offensively. So that'll be a good matchup. But yeah, Trae Young is just, I think he gets overshadowed because of Luka and then all the younger point guards, John Morant, all these guys. But man, Trae's for real. 27 and a half and 10 assists a game in the playoffs is no joke.
Yeah, Trae Young's been very impressive, and he's definitely going to be very good for years to come. Let's go back to the West. The Suns and Lakers, that series has gotten interesting as well. I thought the Lakers were going to pull it out, but, Chris Paul has been super impressive. Do you think the Suns can knock out the champs?
It's tough, man. Being from Phoenix, it's been tough to keep all my friends in check as far as I don't think that the Lakers were going to lose to the Suns, but it's sad to me. This series has been very disappointing. It's been very great for all of us as fans to get to witness Devin Booker in the playoffs. I think he's shown that he was more than ready for this moment, and DeAndre Ayton as well. But it's tough for me to really appreciate this series because it seems like one way or the other it's going to be dictated by injuries. And I want to see both these teams play 7 games or decide a best of 7 series fully healthy. Suns fans are going to attribute their losses to Chris Paul not being healthy. So now he's feeling fully healthy. Now Lakers fans are going to be able to, if they lose the series, to be like, oh, well, AD played hurt or was out. We still don't know his status on that. So that's kind of frustrating to me as a fan because I wanted to see this duel of 2 great defensive teams go at it full strength. But I think a lot of people are saying that AD being out loses a lot of offense for the Lakers, and that's definitely true. But I think more than anything, this opens up the floor offensively for Phoenix. They have a lot more space to make mistakes now with less rebounding on the floor and less of an inside presence. Obviously, they still have Drummond, and they're still going to be able to bring Trez off the bench. Hopefully, he gets more minutes again. But yeah, I think that this almost makes it advantage Suns instead of kind of evening the playing field because they get Chris Paul back and AD's out of the picture.
Yeah, I agree. The series is definitely being dictated by injuries, which is frustrating, but hey, man, the Suns, this was the perfect storm for the Suns in terms of Chris Paul starting to feel a bit more healthy, able to shoot the ball more, but they just had no answer for Anthony Davis. Like, they had no answer. They had no one that can guard him, and then he was gobbling up rebounds. Him on the floor with Drummond and Braun, it shrinks the floor, and a lot of these guys, there's nothing they can do, right? You're putting Jay Crowder on them, you're putting Mikal Bridges, there's no answer for that. But I think, like Dan said, this favors the Suns. And if the Suns get this next win in Phoenix, I'm not going to count Braun out. And I hate that Braun has to carry them, but they're in trouble. They're in trouble.
Yeah, I've been impressed with how good Chris Paul has been when he's healthy. And of course, Devin Booker has been solid. DeAndre Ayton is finally proving to people that he's a great player and all. He was worth the number 1 pick. Let's go. Let's stick with the Lakers. Right now, Montrezl Harrell, you were mentioning him, Dan. He hasn't played a lot. Why do you think he hasn't played as much? Because again, he just won the 6th Man of the Year award last year.
Yeah, man. I think all Hoop fans, I think we've been a little bit confused. I think maybe it has to do with them having more of an advantage with more size and versatility on the floor. Obviously, Trez is a highly skilled guy, but maybe the the Lakers have realized that their advantage on the boards and defensively is having Drummond and another big guy like Gasol out there. But it's hard for me to believe that Trez wouldn't be giving productive minutes out there on both sides of the ball. Whether he's giving up a size advantage or not, he's a dog and he's highly skilled offensively. And I think that he can at least take the same quality shots that Anthony Davis has been getting. And maybe if he gets hot, roll with him. I think maybe their speculation, maybe after he knocked Cameron Payne on his ass in game 1, maybe coach felt like he was a little unpredictable, but that's obviously speculation from Twitter and all this and that. honestly, man, I don't know. I hope that with AD hurt or out, that he gets some burn and gets to, I don't know if prove himself, but just kind of show everyone what the Lakers have been missing. Because I think his lack of minutes has been hurting the Lakers more than helping them.
Yeah, I think their lineups with the bigs have been finicky ever since Drummond got there. It threw the rotation off, and I think they're trying to force Davis and Drummond to play together, which it works at times, but I just don't like that spacing with the Lakers. If they get 60, 70 points in the paint, then it doesn't matter. But I don't like the lineup with Drummond and AD and Brown out there. I don't like it for spacing purposes. And I think Montrez and AD would have been a way better backcourt, because then AD can kind of roam a little more in the mid-range and the three-point line, and Trez can really just hunker down in the paint, but AD can guard their five. But I look at Frank Vogel and some of the lineups he puts out there, and I question some of the minutes. I question Kuz's minutes, and I question, Taylor Horton. I don't know. I think it's more on Frank Vogel than anything Trez has done. I think he's trying to balance four big men, and that stuff came out in the media with Marc Gasol feeling like he should be playing more, and then AD's in and out of the lineup. Drummond, they're trying to figure out if Drummond can play with AD, and then Trez kind of got put on the back burner. It's tough, right? You got veterans, and it's a lot of things going on, but I blame Frank Vogel for not being able to, kind of find space for him, because I think they need him. So, but that's my take on that.
Yeah, it's just kind of weird because last year Montrezl Harrell, the sixth man of the year, was so good with the Clippers and then signs with the Lakers, and I feel like, it just hasn't quite gone the same way as they wanted to. All right, so at the end of the day, who do you guys got in the finals and why?
Man, right now on the East, I got Brooklyn. You touched on it earlier. Most talented team in the league. They can explode for 150 any day of the week. It's tough. The playoffs are about matchups, about individual matchups more than anything. And I think no one matches up well enough with them for 7 games to really slow down all 3 of those guys. And I think at any given time, one or all 3 of those guys is the best player on the court. And then on the West, it's tough on the West, man. I think from the way it's shaping out right now with AD hurt, I think the conference finals will be Jazz and Jazz and Suns or Blazers. So it's tough because I think the Jazz are the best team, but I'm not sure. Like, we've all kind of been counting them out. We don't see them as a legit contender. I want the Clippers to make it, but I'm not. It's tough to trust them with how inconsistent they've been since getting Kawhi and PG together and that whole squad. I think I'm going to keep doubting them until they continue to prove me wrong, because of the last 2 years I've bet on them and they continue to prove me wrong on that way. So I think it's kind of a toss-up in the West between Suns, Blazers, Jazz, and Clippers. And really the Nuggets could pull out that Blazers series too, but it's tough for me to see the Lakers getting much farther than the second round without AD healthy. So I can't give you a definitive answer on the West right now.
I mean, I want to say Brooklyn, but I'm going to say Milwaukee. I got to say Milwaukee just because I know offense matters and I know nobody can stop them, but I don't know, man. The ball just stalls too much for me. And I know Brooklyn has all the talent and they are my favorites in the heart, but I want Milwaukee to win. So I'm going to say Milwaukee out East. And then out West, like Dan said, man, it really depends because these injuries mounting up. And then I would say the Clippers, but they have to play the Jazz in the next round. And the Jazz are good, man. They're really good. I would say my favorites are probably, I'll take the Clippers. I'll take the Clippers out West, because I do think that they have more experience than Utah. And I don't think they have, individually, they can't guard neither Kawhi or Paul George. I don't care if they got Rudy Gobert back there. It don't matter. They can't guard them. And both of those teams shoot very well, but the Jazz they only have one guy that can create his own offense, really create his own offense. Mike Conley can, but Donovan Mitchell's a star. But on the Clippers, they got 2 guys that are legit closers in a sense. So I'm going to say the Clippers out West and Milwaukee out East. And I'm going out on a limb. So.
Yeah, it's really weird this year because the West is so wide open, and I do think that if the Lakers can't do it, which I thought they'd at least make the conference finals, but with all these injuries, especially Anthony Davis, it looks like the Suns could win that series, but at the same time, anything could happen there. I still got the Jazz somehow. The Jazz are really good, and I think they're, again, as Dan mentioned, they're very underrated just because I feel like they're really young. So, and I think at the end of the day, the Nets are going to take it all because, again, they have the most talented roster, and when they're on, they're one of the best teams. So at the moment, I have the Nets and Jazz, but anything could happen. Before we end the interview, and again, thanks for coming on, guys. I love talking the NBA playoffs, especially now. Do you want to talk about your most recent episode on the podcast?
Yeah, man. We've just been while we're gearing up for season 4, we've just been kind of doing some NBA playoff coverage episodes, and just most recently, we talked about these young stars and how they've been performing in their first and second stints in the playoffs, and how we've been surprised by guys like Trae Young and John Morant, and also Luka and Jason Tatum, and how they've performed. We've just been covering the playoffs top to bottom, man. We're doing at least 1 or 2 episodes a week, trying to cover everything and anything that's important, talking about the fan incidents that have been going on. Just a little bit of everything, man. And we just love talking hoops, and we love talking the NBA. So, and we know that we watch every game, so it's just been fun to put more content out.
Yeah, I think Dan, he covered everything I would have said anyway. I'll thank you again for having us on, bro, and I'll just promote my book, A Basketball Mind, out now on Amazon and Kindle, written by me. Check it out if you like basketball, you're into the modern era, and you're a fan, you'll like the book. And yeah, Dan covered everything else about the podcast.
All right, that's great. Again, thanks for coming on. I'll definitely check that book out, Mike. That's really cool that you're making something, or that you wrote something like that. That's really cool. I'll definitely have to check that out. All right, again, you can get your podcast, Apple Podcast, Spotify, all that good stuff, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, again, thanks for coming on, guys. It's going to be it's already fun right now, and it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens, especially out west. All right, thanks for coming on, guys, and pleasure talking to you. Hope to have you on again later.
Sure. Appreciate
man,
it.
Of course. Have a good one.
All right, I'm pleased to be joined by a returning guest, Nolan Schumann and Miles Fuke of the 1 for 1 pod. How's it going, guys?
Good, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How about you guys?
Oh, can't complain. Living the dream. Beautiful day out in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada. It's like 28 degrees. I don't know what that is in Freedom, but nice and warm anyway.
Yeah, it's gorgeous here. It's like, because I work off of like a monthly basis, the beginning of the month is always so much better than the end of the month. So right now I'm just cruising on serotonin at the moment.
Let's get into hockey now. It's been a pretty crazy playoffs. You guys wanted to start a playoff preview, so I think we're doing the Caps and Bruins first.
This series was tough because it's from face value, it looks like it should be a really close series because it's a really, really dynamic offensive team like the Washington Capitals going up against another dynamic offensive but also structurally defensive team in the Boston Bruins. And this series was not close whatsoever. Besides the one overtime game, I believe it was an overtime where the Capitals took one of the games. The Bruins just completely outplayed the Capitals. Alex Ovechkin was just not looking like himself. Really, the whole team just didn't look like themselves. One of the biggest storylines going into the playoffs, and actually right out of the trade deadline, was the acquisition of Taylor Hall, a man that I have very close to my heart, and Miles has a little bit close to his heart, but not as much as me. And those, like, insert him on the second line, and the chemistry he had with David Krejci and Craig Smith has just been next level, and has really clicked that whole top six of Boston together. And you combine that with the fact that you've got a number one Norris Trophy level defenseman in Charlie McAvoy, and I mean, the goaltending of Tuukka Rask, it wasn't even close. And then in addition to both goaltending issues and just not being able to keep up with the Boston Bruins, the Capitals also had the issue of a bit of a culture shift in the locker room right now, because at the moment there is a lot of drama regarding their superstar offensive center, or their superstar center, Evgeny Kuznetsov, and his whole absence from the team due to COVID-19 violations and potentially getting it and contracting it and spreading it, and then not following along all of the proper protocols. The rumors seem to be in Caps land that he's not very well liked in the locker room. So you combine that with Alex Ovechkin is a pending free agent going into this offseason. He'll most likely be back with the Capitals, but the interesting storyline behind this whole thing is that Alex Ovechkin is not all that far from chasing Wayne Gretzky's all-time goals record. So he might look at the situation and say, I can finish out my career in Washington and try and go for the record here. Or maybe I take my talents to another team where I can play with a dynamic number one offensive center and maybe break that record a lot faster than I might think. And then the third issue with that too is the Seattle expansion draft that's going to be coming up in July, in which they could be looking at losing a guy like TJ Oshie, who's very well liked in the locker room.
Yeah, so this series ended up being a 4-1 victory, 4-1 for the Boston Bruins. They closed it out. They, like Nolan said, they won. Washington won the first game in overtime, and I had picked Washington in my bracket and made a comment. Imagine picking the Bruins, LOL. Imagine sitting at home for the next 4 games and watching Boston come to life like a beautiful flower in spring to win out that series. Tough pill to swallow, but Bruins are moving on. The next series, JJ, was the Colorado Avalanche and your St. Louis Blues. Now, unfortunately, it didn't work out to the Blues' favor. 2 years removed from a Stanley Cup, they look like a completely different team. The Colorado Avalanche and St. Louis Blues went into this series with a nice quote from Blues captain Ryan O'Reilly, where essentially he said, "We're going to have a lot of fun and we're going to beat them." Well, takes that didn't age well. They got swept 4-0. They were also outscored 18-7 on the way to that sweep. One of the big storylines of this series was Nazem Kadri. He came over from the Toronto Maple Leafs a few years ago. He's a repeat offender. Some guys would describe him as a dirty player. Got an 8-game suspension for a hit to the head. Now, for casual hockey fans out there, playoff suspensions are usually not quite that long, even if they are a returning or a repeating offender. And Kadri actually took this one to arbitration. He took this right to the top of the league to see if they could get it shortened. Was not. So he is available to come back for Game 7 if there is a Game 7 in the second round series. If the Avs were to lose, he would play out the remainder of that suspension into next season. But surprise, surprise, the Avalanche are really, really good, and I don't think they're going to get swept next round. There's jokes in hockey culture right now that the Avalanche might win all 16 games with no losses and take the cup. They look absolutely phenomenal so far. One of the stories that's coming out of this as well is that there's people saying that the Blues need a significant retool while their core is still young enough to stay competitive in their Central Division and the Western Conference as a whole. So it's going to be an interesting offseason in St. Louis to see how they go about, and it's going to be really fun to watch Colorado keep rolling in these playoffs.
Yeah, just to add to that, if you're someone that's looking to get into hockey and you've never watched a game in your life, if you can watch any team in the league, watch a Colorado game. Colorado is, I said this to Miles actually last night, I firmly believe, and it took me a while to like really break this down and think about it, but like, I think this Colorado team might be the best NHL team I've ever watched in my lifetime. And I've been alive for almost 27 years. So it's the ease of puck movement on their side is unbelievable. It's next level hockey. They're playing chess while everyone's playing checkers. It's unbelievable.
Let's go back to St. Louis there for a sec. Again, you mentioned, of course, they won the Stanley Cup just 2 years ago. What happened to a Blues team that was supposed to be really good the next year? Why has the last 2 years not been exactly the way they are? sorry, let me rephrase that. Why has St. Louis not been able to take that next level?
That's a really good question. And I think a lot of people in hockey talks have been asking themselves that. I personally think that it really boils down to the lightning that they were able to capture in a bottle that was their Stanley Cup run. Obviously, everybody kind of knows that up until the halfway point of that season, they were last place. They were looking brutal. The emergence of rookie goaltender, well, he was like 26 at the time, Jordan Binnington, came up and played lights out and took them all the way to the final. They just, right place, right time, right group, and really pulled it together for that 19 run. Obviously, the next year with the COVID year, something that was talked about a lot in the bubbles, the way that everything kind of broke down, was just how hard the St. Louis Blues locker room was hit by COVID-19 in 2020. So when they came back to return to play, a lot of the players were saying, like, man, my lungs feel like I've got nothing there. My legs are so weak. And they came into that play-in, and I think they only won one game before being eliminated in the first round. So a mix of bad luck and, being unhealthy, also losing their star defenseman, Alex Pietrangelo, to free agency at the end of last season has hurt them going forward. But like we'd mentioned, that core is getting a little bit older, and the roster has changed piece by piece to some of those supporting characters that were a huge help. Like even Pat Maroon, great locker room guy, great depth forward, went to Tampa Bay and won a cup last year. So just a few players that have left ship and some sickness that's really kind of taken the wind out of their sails in terms of making them a dynasty.
They also did miss Vladimir Tarasenko for most of this year as well, and that's a massive loss. I mean, you're losing a guy that can pot you 40 goals in a regular season.
Yeah, he's probably one of the best shooters in the NHL, and they didn't have him for a large portion of this year.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, especially for St. Louis. They were supposed to be really good in the next few years, and it was just kind of crazy how the run was, because I remember back in 2019, it was interesting because if you go back to when the Rams left St. Louis to LA, I think it was the owner, Stan Kroenke, said that you can't win a championship in St. Louis, or you can't win a championship in a small town, which is weird because the St. Louis Cardinals, the baseball team, got 11 World Series titles, and it was kind of funny, and it was a little bit bad karma for him because they ended up winning a Stanley Cup before the Rams even win a Super Bowl. So I thought that was really cool. Let's go on to the next series. What series did you guys want to talk about?
Next up, we've got the Carolina Hurricanes and the Nashville Predators, a good Southern battle that a lot of people going into the playoffs weren't thinking was going to be much of a series. Nolan and I actually on our show, 1 for 1, predicted that this was going to be both of us predicted that it was going to be a 4-0 sweep, and it was anything but. The first couple of games, Carolina came out hot, and looked damn good and took both games fairly easily. And then Nashville decided to eat some hot chicken and get things rolling, and took the next 2 games. We also got to see the emergence of the Nashville Predators goaltender Jussi Saros, who has largely been Pekka Rinne's backup. And Pekka Rinne was like a perennial top goalie in the NHL for years. So to see his understudy kind of overtake him in these playoffs and the end of the season here was really interesting for hockey fans. Pekka's getting a little bit older now, though, so it's time to give up the reins. But yeah, he was lights out in this series. Carolina's a young, deep team, but they were showing a little bit of signs of maybe some inexperience in being able to handle the pressure and dropping those 2 games to the Predators. But they ultimately ended up winning that series 4-2. And the Carolina Hurricanes have a really cool culture around them. Their coach, Rod Brind'Amour, is a former Carolina Hurricane himself, former Stanley Cup champion on a number of teams. And there was a little bit of them that went kind of viral, where they were in the dressing room after their series victory, and Rod Brind'Amour called his father on the phone, and the whole team sang him happy birthday. So nice feels, nice story. And if that doesn't tug at your heartstrings, I don't know what will.
And the one thing I wanted to mention too about Carolina is they had a pretty major offseason loss this year that not very many people talked about, because it maybe statistically speaking, it wasn't a big deal, but I think in the locker room, it was a huge deal. Justin Williams officially retired this year, the guy that was known as Mr. Game 7, spent years in Carolina as well as with the Los Angeles Kings. But I think that goes a long way too. I mean, we talk about veteran leadership in sports, and I think in hockey, it's still, they put a lot of weight into it still. When you look at like basketball teams or whatever, you do have a little bit of that, but it's not as prominent as it is in hockey. Like, you will poll 32 general managers, and most of them will say, "Oh, it's important to have a veteran bottom six help in your system." So we like to have that in there. And I think having a guy like Justin Williams on your team, who's been there before and is already a 3-time Stanley Cup champion, well, it's nice to have that guy on your side when you're trying to go for Stanley Cups. But unfortunately, he is now retired, and I believe living in the great town of Cobourg, Ontario. So unfortunate to see, but I mean, the Carolina Hurricanes are pretty awesome.
Yeah, they're still, like, not to take any credit away from them, they're still an absolute wagon, and their reward is, well, spoiler, playing the Tampa Bay Lightning this round. They were actually in the same division as Tampa Bay with the realignment, and in real life, they're in the same or regular life, I guess it is real life. They're in the same division as them. So really cool to see a rivalry in round 2 and 2 damn good teams making for a must-watch series.
All right, so yeah, let's go to the next matchup here.
Okay, Lightning Panthers. I'll do this one.
You go ahead.
All right. This is, I mean, I don't think it's even close to say that. Well, maybe it is close to say, because probably the one we're gonna leave for very, very, very last is actually the funnest series. This was just a treat of a series to watch. High scoring affairs, battle of a couple of goaltenders that have been incredible in their careers, but were not playing up to their standards, and just a couple of high flying offensive teams. The big story behind the Tampa Bay Lightning returning to the playoffs against the Florida Panthers were the arrival of Nikita Kucherov and also Steven Stamkos, their captain. Now, Stamkos did play in the season, but very big controversy. Nikita Kucherov did not play. I believe he ended up having, what was it, Miles? Was it hip surgery or something like that? I think it was hip surgery.
They're saying hip surgery, but there's a lot of people in hockey circles that are saying they were just stashing him so that they wouldn't have to pay any cap penalties.
Yeah. So if you're unfamiliar with how the salary cap works in hockey, it's a hard cap. So comparatively to basketball, where they have a soft cap where you can dip into a luxury tax, hockey doesn't have anything like that. But what they do have is a thing called long-term injured reserve, which means that insurance basically pays for the player to play for your team. And essentially what they did was they announced right at the beginning of the offseason, so the version of July 1st that would have been in October because of COVID, that Nikita Kucherov was going to be going on LTIR and would miss the entire season. So that would mean that his $9.5 million cap hit, which, by the way, he's about the 7th or 8th highest paid player in the league, which means that gets pushed until playoffs. Now, when playoffs happen, there's no salary cap. So you can activate players all you want. So if a team is really deep, like Tampa Bay, they can basically put all these players on LTIR, run their way all the way to the playoffs, and then once playoffs start, they're good to go, and they can have as expensive of a lineup as they want. I think when the number came in, it was like $98 million, and it's an $81 million cap league. So just unbelievably insane. But anyways,
Nolan, how did he do in his first game back? I think there was a lot of rust, and people were saying that he wasn't going to be flying at the speed he usually does. What happened? He just kind of looked like a bum. He had 3 points after not playing all year long, and was just electric the entire time, which included 2 goals. Actually, Miles and I were actually mid-recording, and we were talking about the series. And then I looked up and I said, "Oh yeah," and Nikita Kucherov has 2 goals already. But the other nice story about this too is the Florida Panthers. I mean, they have been essentially perennial losers since they went to the Stanley Cup final in the early 90s, and they've went through all different iterations, the Roberto Luongo era, the Thomas Vokoun era.
just the area, like they're a perennial team where they're not selling tickets. They're not featured in multiple advertisements. Their players don't typically win big hardware. But what they do have is a great foundation with Alex Barkov, Jonathan Huberdeau, a guy like Aaron Ekblad, who unfortunately was lost to a leg injury earlier this year. I believe he broke his femur. So awful injury to see happen. But it just meant that there's a bit of a tougher round one matchup. Another cool thing about the Panthers, though, is that their rookie goaltender, Spencer Knight, was actually the first 2000s born goaltender to win a playoff game, which is just very cool to see. Now, to combine with that, their supposed to be starter, Sergei Bobrovsky, is in the second year of a 7-year deal that pays him $10 million a year. And he's essentially the third goalie on the depth chart right now. So you don't like to see that. But I mean, the Tampa Bay Lightning are what we in the hockey circles call a wagon. They're insane. They're very, very, very good. And they're probably going to be that sort of, we're hoping to see a matchup between them and the Colorado Avalanche in the Stanley Cup final. And yes, in case you're wondering, Tampa Bay Lightning took this one in 6.
Yeah, and I think the Lightning right now, they are what I've been hearing from a lot of people in the hockey world, and even watching them a little bit, they're so dominant. And I feel like, again, the Lightning have a very good chance to winning the title this year. So let's go to our next matchup, the Knights versus Wild. We'll start with you first. Want to go first, Miles, on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was watching this series pretty closely. Obviously, Nolan and I, the One for One podcast primarily revolves around the Edmonton Oilers, but I'm a closet Vegas fan. They've got a few players on that roster that I absolutely love. And the Wild were a really interesting story this year, led by their phenom 27-year-old rookie, Kirill Kaprizov. So he was drafted in 2015, the same year as Connor McDavid, best player in the NHL. But played a lot of professional hockey in Russia and decided to come over for his first season this year. And wow, did he look good. Not just good, he looked great. And he kind of single-handedly turned the Wild from like a mid-pack team to a third-place finish in their division with a matchup against the second-place Vegas Golden Knights. So we're really excited for this series. Knew it was going to be a little bit of a treat. Can only imagine what the Wild are going to look like if they end up getting a true number one center. And side note, potential Jack Eichel landing spot for all you Buffalo Sabres fans out there. Marc-Andre Fleury is the goaltender for the Vegas Golden Knights, and he absolutely made the Pittsburgh Penguins have nightmares about giving him up in the expansion draft a few years ago. Today, he was nominated for the Vezina Award, which is the best goalie in the NHL. And yeah, he was great this season, won his last 9 consecutive starts. So the Knights were going into the playoffs really, really hot. And this game went the distance. It took all 7 games to wrap up, with the last game in Vegas being the first fully open stadium game in Nevada. So they had a packed house for game 7. It looked electric. The crowd was absolutely buzzing. And yeah, Vegas ended up taking it in a really, really close series that went back and forth. So very entertaining first round, and kind of sucks for the Knights that they had to go 7 when Colorado got to rest up really nice with a 4-game sweep against the St. Louis Blues. So those two absolute titans are facing off against each other. So you're definitely sensing a little bit of a theme here, where the Vegas Golden Knights and Colorado Avalanche are two absolute powerhouses playing each other to go to the Final Four, and so are the Hurricanes and Lightning out of the other side.
It's actually pretty interesting when you compare the two teams, because they're very similar in their own ways. Both have very deep defensive cores. They have talent, like they have good to great talent up and down the lineup, but they have very little of, like, well, at least in like the forward groups, they have very little of like that elite, like top tier talent. So with Vegas, you got a guy like Mark Stone, and then on Minnesota, you got a guy like Kaprizov, and neither of them has a true number one center. Like Mark Stone typically plays with a guy like Chandler Stevenson, who has been like a middle six forward pretty well his entire career. So it's amazing that both of these teams have done it with the formula that everybody knows in hockey, where you need a number one center, number one defenseman, number one goaltender. And also both of these guys are riding goalies that are older guys but have somehow drank from the fountain of youth.
And it's pretty crazy too that when the Golden Knights got the win here, they had a full capacity crowd. That's awesome. I do want to mention before we go into some other playoff series about the Montreal. I know Montreal can't have fans, but do you guys know if they'll be able to have fans at all during the playoffs or not?
We're actually going to talk about that in the preview for the second round, because it's going to be really what's the word? Interesting for how it plays out when the winner of the North meets up with the American team. So not to push your question off, but we're going to dive into that pretty deep, because there's definitely some discrepancies that need to be addressed from the NHL.
Yeah, it's kind of disappointing, especially for how much Canada loves hockey, and yet they can't have fans. And like outside Canada, if you go to the US, of course, teams are actually having fans now. So that's disappointing. All right, so let's go to our next playoff series. Do you want to start with that as well, Miles?
Sure. I'll do Penguins Islanders, Nolan. Sidney Crosby and his band of merry men have been together for a number of years and have won 3 Stanley Cups together. And the band of merry men in which we are referring to is primarily their top 3, which is Chris Letang, Evgeny Malkin, and Sidney Crosby. They're all getting up there in age. They're all roughly 35, 34 years old. And this was really what a lot of people were thinking, the last kick at the can for them. They've lost out in the first round of the playoffs the past 2 seasons, and they got to face the staunch defensive team of the New York Islanders, coached by Barry Trotz. This was one that a lot of people were thinking was going to go, pretty deep as well. And I believe that the Islanders won it in 6. And the main storyline that came out of it was, Pittsburgh, why did you ever let Fleury go? Going back to the expansion draft with Vegas, Pittsburgh was fresh off a Stanley Cup victory where Matthew Murray was an emerging goaltending star. Had some questions around him, but the main thing that the Penguins needed to figure out was if they were going to keep Fleury or if they were going to expose him and ride Matt Murray. Well, we all know how that worked out. They let Fleury go, went to Vegas, took him to a Cup final, Vezina nominee now. He's doing not too bad. Where's Matt Murray? Removed. He is in the wasteland of the Ottawa Senators, who were one of the top 3 worst teams in the league this year. Matt Murray's had a lot of questions around his glove hand, his career, and kind of got exposed. I think he had like 0.85 something save percentage. Got a little bit better as the year went on, but numbers were looking a little bit rough. And Penguins decided to go with their new up-and-comer, Tristan Jarry. Well, JJ, if you weren't watching, you probably don't know, but Tristan Jarry, for lack of a better term, shit the bed and completely lost the Penguins the last 2 games of this series with flubs in overtime for really soft goals. His advanced numbers were terrible. His straight-up numbers were terrible, and really didn't even give the Penguins a chance to win. So those 2 key overtime losses on the back of Tristan Jarry, and it's not fair to put a loss on a goalie. As a former goaltender myself, I know how much that hurts, but you also need to be objective when you're analyzing a sporting event, and Tristan Jarry did not give them a chance to win. So sucks for the Penguins that they are now eliminated in the first round for the 3rd consecutive year, but the Islanders are damn good. And that Islanders-Bruins series so far has been really, really entertaining as well. So I think that the better team ultimately won, and we're getting a really exciting second-round matchup.
Yeah, and I think I was listening to Pat McAfee recently, and he's a big Penguins fan himself, and I think he wasn't too happy about what happened, but I feel like, as you mentioned, Pittsburgh's getting up there, and it's sad to say because just a few years ago, they were one of the top teams. Sidney Crosby is one of the best. He's one of the best hockey players to ever play. So it's kind of disappointing to see a team like Pittsburgh go down a little bit just because of age and stuff like that. So
yeah, back-to-back cups a few years ago, man. They've definitely had a fall from grace.
Yeah. And it's disappointing to see that because, again, Pittsburgh was fun to watch whenever you'd watch them. I mean, they dominated what they won again 2016, 2017. I think it was the last time they won. So, all right, let's jump on to the Habs versus Leafs. What did you guys think of that matchup?
Well, this is a very, very juicy one, JJ. The Toronto Maple Leafs and the Montreal Canadiens are, Nolan, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that they might be the 2 highest probably two of the top 5 highest grossing sports brands in North America. Like their fan bases are absolutely insane. The entire
horrible
and so hard to deal with in Canada because our main sports broadcaster is TSN. Stands for Toronto Sports Network, because they like to forget about every other team in Canada and only focus on the Leafs. And all of Bell Media in the province of Quebec loves to simp for the Montreal Canadiens. So the Canadiens and the Leafs are both 2 Original 6 teams, have been playing against each other for over a century. The rivalry runs deep. So for the two of them to meet in the playoffs is a huge deal, and especially in the first round, where the Toronto Maple Leafs were the first place team all year in the Scotiabank North Division, looked like a powerhouse. Nobody was really giving Montreal a shot here, and this series went all the way to 7. Let's recap how we got here. Leafs forever is what they brand themselves as. Leafs forever, a first round loser. They blew a 3-1 lead and lost Game 7, as they always do. Their star players, Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, were absolutely invisible this series. Going back a few games, let's say 18 playoff games, Mitchell Marner, who's paid $10.5 million, is without a point. The Leafs have not won a Stanley Cup since the year 1967. And in 32 days will hold the record in the NHL for the longest Stanley Cup drought. Officially, the New York Rangers are handing that torch over to the Toronto Maple Leafs. If you can't tell how much joy this brings me, I don't know what to tell you. And I think Nolan is on the same page. And it's not that we hate Leafs fans. We know a lot of Leafs fans that are really good people, but it's just the media that surrounds them and talks about them as this holier than thou franchise that can do no wrong. So to see them, with the star power they have, $48 million in their key forwards, all the veteran acquisitions that they made, the first round pick that they gave up for Nick Foligno, they really went all in this year and blew it to an absolutely on fire goaltender, Carey Price, who played fantastic. So before I turn things over to Nolan, I'll just share a few numbers with you. It has been 19,754 days since the Toronto Maple Leafs won a Stanley Cup. 0 days since blowing a 3-1 series lead. 6,251 days since they won a playoff series. The last time they did that was in 2004, which is before the salary cap era of the NHL was instilled. 464 days since they lost to an emergency Zamboni driver who played goaltender for the Carolina Hurricanes, and 33 days, well, 32 now, until they set the record for the longest Stanley Cup drought in NHL history. Nolan, how do you feel?
I feel fantastic. When we say Leaf fans, we mainly mean, or when we say that we don't mean all Leaf fans, we mean the ones that are like good guys or the ones that are level-headed, mainly because they're our friends. But this one gets poured out to all the homies that decided that they were going to try and make these arguments that Austin Matthews was even in the same stratosphere as Connor McDavid. Well, you know what? The Oilers may not have done that well this year, but I can tell you what, Connor McDavid was not nearly as invisible as Austin Matthews was. You might as well call him the fucking Hollow Man, because you can't see him. Whoa,
John Cena.
Yeah, he's John Cena at this point, man. Just a loaded roster, a team that so many pundits thought was on the same level as a Colorado or a Tampa Bay. Big to you guys. But it's sweetness to my ears is what it is.
And you guys were mentioning that, Toronto has spent so much money every year in free agency and stuff like that. They kind of remind me, and I guess they haven't won in a while either, but the Toronto Maple Leafs kind of remind me a lot of the New York Yankees, where they spend a lot of money, but yet they haven't done anything. Now, the Yankees won a World Series back in 2009, but it seems like that's kind of the direction that the Maple Leafs are considered as. So, I mean, it's crazy to see how Toronto hasn't won since 1967, and Toronto is supposed to be this big hockey town. So, I mean, that's got to hurt for all these Toronto fans. So, all right, let's go to the next round, Jets, Oilers. Who wants to start with that one?
I'll take it. Well, this is the one that we didn't want to talk about, and I don't know why you're making us relive bad memories. But we'll keep it short but sweet. The Oilers were heavily favored going into this matchup. Obviously, as we've said multiple times, we are an Oilers flavored podcast. And unfortunately, in a series where the Oilers were favored to win it in most likely 6, they were swept by the Winnipeg Jets. And essentially the reason being is 3 overtimes in a row. Game 4 took 3 overtimes to finish. And they ran into an extremely hot goaltender in Connor Hellebuck. Connor Hellebuck is probably either the best or a top 2 goalie in this league. Series stealing potential. And that's the unfortunate part about hockey, is that unfortunately you can be as stacked as possible, but if you run into a hot goalie, then your series might pretty much well be over.
Toronto.
Yeah, exactly. There, Toronto. But like I said, 3 overtimes. It was basically a coin flip, and a lot of the fancy underlying numbers of this entire series were all in Edmonton's favor. But that unfortunately didn't matter when it came down to bounces and chances that all just seemed to go Winnipeg's way. Another cool little factoid. So typically, like, a number 1 defenseman in a game will play upwards of anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes. In the game, and Darnell Nurse, the Oilers' number 1 defenseman, in that game where they played 3 overtimes, played a grand total of 62 minutes, including a 5-minute shift. 5 minutes, which typical D-man shift, Miles, like what, 50 seconds? Minute and a half?
A minute 30, you're screaming. The fact that the fact he was out there for 5 minutes is what? Crazy.
Yeah. But the storyline people want to point to is Connor McDavid, which a guy that I don't put a lot of stock into the notion that he's not a playoff performer. It's just he got shut down, and unfortunately the coaching decisions on the Oilers' behalf were not ideal to put Connor McDavid in a position where he could possibly pull off that series. Now going into this offseason, though, this is the offseason that the team has been preparing for since general manager Ken Holland took over the team. This was circled right from the beginning. So it remains to be seen as per what he has planned. A bunch of bad contracts come off the books, and it looks like there's going to be some buyouts there's going to be some buyouts made. So we could be looking at an offseason where the Oilers turn into one of those upper tier full cup contenders.
And if you want a deeper dive into this series, check out the 1-for-1 podcast, episode 21, dropping tomorrow.
All right, definitely check that out. Let's go on to another series, Bruins Islanders. That's going to be interesting. Who do you guys like in that matchup, and what do you think stands out in this particular series?
So this series is the kickoff for the second round. We are moving into the second round showcase here, folks. And this series is actually already 2 games in. It's tied 1-1. Like we've said before, the Bruins are deep. They've got a good goaltender. They've got a good D-core. They've got a great forward group. The Islanders are staunch defensively, really deep in their forwards. One of the best defensive pairings in the NHL in Pulak, and who's his partner?
Pelech.
Unreal. Great goaltender in Semyon Varlamov. Myself, I'm liking the Islanders. I'm not liking them in a sexy way, but I'm liking them in 7.
I feel the exact same way. I think the Islanders are just so damn tenacious defensively, and they've got their forwards are pricks to play against. That's the best way to put it. And I just think that they have that synergy over the years too. And
no disrespect to Boston, but the Islanders are probably one of the best. They're the best coach team in the NHL.
Yeah,
the way that they play systems is insane. So it won't be a sexy win, but I think it's going to be an Islanders win.
All right, so let's go to the next matchup. Of course, you got the Avalanche and Golden Knights. That looks like a fun series. Who do you guys like in that one?
I think this is obviously the series of the playoffs. But if Game 1 is any indication, this series might be over already, because the Colorado Avalanche took on the Vegas Golden Knights and absolutely curb stomped them 7-1, including a brilliant performance from Nathan McKinnon, who's among the best players in the NHL. Like I said, if you're looking for a team to watch and you're looking for some exciting hockey, Avs all the way, man. They're insanely good. I've got Avs in 5.
Yeah, I think Nolan hit the nail on the head. If Vegas decides to show up and plays hard after that defeat that they got in that first game. Worth noting that Robin Lehner played instead of Marc-Andre Fleury, which was a decision that had a few people in the hockey world scratching their heads. So we'll see how the rest of the series plays out. But yeah, it definitely looks like it could be Avs in 5. Few names to keep an eye on if you are a passive hockey fan to watch here. Cale Makar, stud defenseman, second or third year in the league, already a Norris candidate, plays unbelievable. Nathan McKinnon, as Nolan mentioned, is world-class. Mikko Rantanen can shoot the puck like nobody's business. Captain Gabriel Landeskog looks to have found another gear. Devon Taves is another defenseman on Colorado who's playing out of his mind. He's so solid. And their goaltender, Philip Grubauer, tough to beat as well.
German Prince.
All right, so another matchup, Maple Leafs versus Jets. What do you guys like that?
JJ, that's the Habs and Jets. Poor Leafs fans. They have to take another beating here, just getting dragged through the mud. Habs and Jets, honestly, JJ, nobody likes this one. Nobody wants to see this. Are you familiar with the economic or the mathematical concept of game theory? This is game theory, but every outcome is a loss. No hockey fan wanted to see this second round be Habs Jets, but it's really going to boil down to a goalie battle between Connor Hellebuyck and Carey Price. Both of them are going to have played the first round standing on their heads. Down the middle, the forward group of the Winnipeg Jets, I think, are stronger than the forward group of the Montreal Canadiens. The Montreal Canadiens have the edge on D, and it's really going to come down to goaltending and who's going to be able to get the better of the other. Myself, I like the Jets in 6.
I hate that I'm saying this because I really don't like them, but I think it's Habs in 7.
Hey, I don't think you're crazy for that, man.
Yeah, I think the thing with the Habs is I think if they're going to steal any series, they're going to steal the first 2, and it's going to be on the back of Carey Price going back to his prime Carey Price form, because in his prime, Carey Price was the undisputed best goalie in the NHL and might have been the best player in the NHL at one point. Just a franchise-altering goaltender. And in addition to that, you've got a bunch of guys that, similar to the Islanders, are pricks to play against. Josh Anderson, Brendan Gallagher, even a guy like Paul Byron, who scored a beautiful shorthanded goal in the Leaf series. These guys are difference makers, and they might not be the high-end, top-tier talent that you might see out of teams like Tampa Bay or Colorado, but they're still really deep. And if you want a guy to watch out for in this series, Cole Caulfield, who is a small, undersized guy, but has probably one of the best shots to enter this league in a very long time.
Yeah, won the Hobie Baker Award coming out of the University of Wisconsin this year. So he made the jump right into the NHL and is looking to be an impact player already.
All right, as we wrap up the second round, Hurricanes, Lightning. I'm assuming you have the Lightning winning, but can the Hurricanes put up a fight on this one?
I think they can definitely put up a fight. How long that fight goes, in my opinion, is 6 games. I think the Tampa Bay Lightning already took game 1 2-1. Was a hell of a game, super entertaining. I think Carolina is going to be able to steal a couple, but not enough to take the series.
Yeah, Tampa's already up 1-0 in game 2, and Carolina has just peppered them with shots on net. So I don't know if I see them taking this, but I actually completely agree with Miles. I think it's going to be Tampa in 6.
And I'm assuming let's see here. I think we already mentioned this a little bit, but do you think there's a good chance that the Lightning could go back-to-back this year?
It's possible, definitely. They have the talent for it. It's so hard to go back-to-back in this league. The Penguins did it only 5 years ago, and then before that, it was the Red Wings. 15 years before that or something like that. And so it's incredibly rare in hockey. It's very hard to, because especially it's really a game of chance more than anything. I mean, if your goalie decides to have a bad 2 games, then your whole cup plan could be completely screwed. So it's possible. I don't like them as much as I like Colorado, just for the sheer stupendous historic nature of Colorado, but it's definitely possible for sure.
Mm-hmm. I agree with Nolan. Well, no, I don't agree with Nolan. I'm saying Carolina. I'm saying Tampa. Sorry, that was word vomit. I just wanted to touch on it quick because I told you we were going to, and we haven't gotten to talk about it yet. But fans, fans are going to be really, really important in the Final Four. So the way that the kind of reseed of the playoffs works is right now what you're seeing is a playoff for all of the realigned divisions. So the winner of each realigned division gets a ranking based on their regular season record. So the Colorado Avalanche won the President's Trophy. They were the #1 team in the NHL this year. They will be the first seed. Statistically, whoever comes out of Canada will be the 4th seed. So Jets or Habs, eat your heart out. You get to play in Colorado. And this is where it gets really crappy. All the American teams are able to have fans in their stands. The only Canadian team that is able to have fans is Montreal. And even then they're at like a 25% capacity. But that sucks because there's a travel restriction. So as soon as the Canadian team wins, what happens is they move to the city where the American team they're playing is, play all of their games out of their home arena as the home team, even though it'll be packed with Avs fans. So that really sucks. That's a huge obstacle for whichever Canadian team wins to overcome. And I think that it's one that might be insurmountable. And I don't know why the NHL did it the way that they did. I think it was just to keep the season rolling, keep a tight timeline so that they can start next year on time. But if the Oilers, I'll put it to you this way. If the Oilers were going to be that team to win the North Division and I couldn't go to an Oilers playoff game for the conference final, I would absolutely lose my mind. I would be rioting in the streets.
That's got to stink. I mean, we just mentioned it earlier, but, Canada loves hockey, and yet they can't really have fans. I mean, that's got to stink. And, I mean, hopefully it gets better next year, which I think it's going to, but it's got to really stink. And I feel a lot for the Canadian, or just feel for any type of hockey fan in Canada. All right, so at the end of the day, you guys kind of mentioned it, but who do you think will really win the Stanley Cup this year? Do you think you kind of mentioned a little bit with the Lightning, but who do you think will take it all this year?
I'm saying Tampa over the Avs in 7.
Avs over Tampa in 5.
Ooh, spicy.
That would be interesting to watch. I would love to watch it like that game. I mean, the Avalanche and Lightning right now, they look really good, as you guys have mentioned, and I would love to watch that. And of course, I'm just ready to watch any type of playoff hockey. So anyways, before we end the interview, again, this has been great. Thanks for coming on, guys. Can you tell us about your most recent episode? And we can get on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, right?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of currently finishing up right now. It's basically a debriefing on the Oilers season after the Game 4 loss on the Winnipeg Jets. So it's not too depressing as episode 20 was, because that was a tough one to listen to. But 21 is a little bit lighter, and you get a nice little pre and post game Leafs talk. So if you want our immediate reactions to Game 7 of Leafs Habs, it's waiting for you at the end of the episode.
All right. Thanks for coming on, guys. Again, don't forget to check out the 1for1 podcast. You can check out Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Follow them also on Instagram at @1_1forpod. Thanks, guys, for coming on. All my deep regards to you guys. Unfortunately, for you guys falling in the playoffs. Sad for you guys, but hopefully next year is better.
Thanks, man.
Thanks a lot, JJ. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Town Podcast, or the STP Pod for short. If you want to check out more videos of the Sports Town Podcast, click on the left. If you want to subscribe to the channel, click on the right.